the coffin. So I think that will be an extraordinary phenomenon.
Andrew, what do you think was her finest moment, at least in public life?
Gosh, there were so many. There really were. I mean, one has to remember she's the last reigning monarch who actually served in the Second World War. She was a member of the ATS in the Second World War. And that in itself is quite something. The moment that she was up on the balcony waving to the crowds on VE Day when after Germany had surrendered in the Second World War alongside her parents and Winston Churchill. I mean, that was obviously a fantastic moment. I think that phrase that that President Biden mentioned after 9/11 when she said that grief is the price we pay for love, that it still gets me in the throat, that statement. She was a very, very pro-American monarch. She loved America. Whenever she had a chance to go on holiday, which was only 3 times in her life, i.e. a holiday where she was not holidaying as the Queen, she went to America each time, to Kentucky. So I think that the way in which, through soft power, she's managed to make our country a major minor one on the world stage is something that we're going to thank her for very greatly.
Yes, we are entering a period, certainly a period of mourning in the UK, but a reflection on a life well lived. 96 years old. Let's pause for a moment to give an update to those just joining us. Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest serving monarch, has died at the age of 96. Buckingham Palace posting a statement that reads in part, "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon." Her family rushed to be at the Queen's side at Balmoral earlier today after doctors publicly stated that they had become concerned for her health. The Queen reigned for 7 decades through periods of peace and crisis. And now for the first time in 70 years, the UK has a new monarch. King Charles III, who was chosen to go by that name, the third, the Queen's son, stepping into his new role the moment she passed away. He issued a statement that reads in part, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family." Let's take a moment now to look back at the Queen's remarkable legacy.
2021, her beloved husband of 7 decades, Prince Philip, died. In her words, he was her strength and stay. She was the longest reigning British monarch in history on the throne for more than 70 years. Her Platinum Jubilee celebrated with a military parade. Beacons lit across the world.
I keep mine in here.
A surprise appearance from Paddington Bear. And over 10 million people across Britain gathering for street parties to honour their one and only Queen. The Jubilee concluded with a final wave from Queen Elizabeth from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. She was joined by 3 future kings, Prince Charles, Prince William and Prince George. The crowds cheering for Queen Elizabeth II, a monarch for the ages. Keir Simmons, NBC News.
And Keir joining us now from outside Buckingham Palace in London. And Keir, we spoke shortly after the news broke, and I think you expressed perhaps what a lot of people were feeling, that they were surprised at their reaction to this news, knowing the inevitability, knowing her frail health, her age.
My beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen.
Yeah, Lester, you know it's coming, but it's just hard to comprehend all the same, isn't it? It's like, as I've said a number of times in this broadcast, it's hard to comprehend that we were standing here and she was standing on that balcony of Buckingham Palace, and it's hard to just take in the breadth of her life. As I was saying in that report there, she was born just a short distance from here in a very smart part of London in a private house, because royals and members of the aristocracy, that's what they did. They didn't go to the hospital to give birth. She was educated in Buckingham Palace behind me there. She wasn't sent to school, because you weren't sent to school if you were a royal in those days. You certainly didn't go to university, and she didn't. She was born in the 1920s in the era of the wireless radio. There were no computers, there were no cell phones, and yet, and I'm just going to step out of the way so you can just see this, and I know it's dark so it's hard to see, but the lights that you can see amongst that crowd are the lights of cell phones being held up by the crowd. And now a little bit hidden by the umbrellas, which in that classic, I mean, it's completely British, isn't it, that people are having to stand there with umbrellas because there was a light drizzle of rain right now. But, you know, as I was saying, the lights you can see are the lights of cell phones. Something that she would never have imagined. Her family would never have imagined when she was born in the 1920s. So what an extraordinary life, what an extraordinary era she has lived through. The Elizabethan era, the modern Elizabethan era, which has now come to an end. And I think she wasn't just a constitutional figure. She's become a cultural figure in the modern world. Incredible. In that report, you saw her enjoying some of the features of modernity, of television and things. Remember that moment, Lester, at the Olympics when she agreed to do that spoof James Bond and pretend that she jumped from a plane? I mean, just think about how kind of impressive it is that a woman who was born in that age was able to stay so traditional and steadfast and at the same time prepared to become the person that she became.
Keir, thank you. We'll continue to come back to you as our coverage continues this afternoon. Right now, let me bring back Wilfred Frost. Wilfred, she had 70 years to make the crown her own, to define, what the head of the monarchy looks like. Will King Charles III also perhaps go his own way and redefine it in another way?
Well, of course, that remains to be seen, but I think he can take a great lesson from his late mother in the way that she led her life and reformed the monarchy when it needed to be. And there were moments where she let that need for reform get ahead of her. The late 90s, as Keir has already mentioned, was perhaps an example. But in the final couple of decades, she has really clearly moved it with the times so that it's in a place where there's never demands for change. And I think he will, as we've heard already, with perhaps decisions to slimline it more, will try and move ahead of the curve on that need for reform. But I think above all else, the key thing she did so well that he will try and emulate is deliver on her duty and do so with the grace that she did it, never seeking glory, only looking to serve her people. And there's a sort of quiet nature with which she did it that I think so endeared her to the people of this nation and around the world and gained her that respect and admiration, Lester.
We spend so much time talking about her in a more modern era of the last, several decades, but we forget even, being a royal, some of the things she did, working on trucks, for example, around the war. She was a very different kind of monarch.
She absolutely was, and working on trucks during the war is clearly a great example of that, loving the countryside. And despite being a monarch, despite being a queen who was born in an age where that meant just profound amounts, she connected with individual people. And just think how times have changed over 70 years. The world and Britain is much more of a meritocracy today, as it should be. It respects the establishment much less than it used to, and yet the Queen's approval ratings, and because of it the monarchy's approval ratings, are higher than it's ever been. That cannot happen without her having delivered quite so remarkably as she did. It's a huge task to follow her, of course, now for King Charles III, but I think he has already taken great lessons, and we've already got a glimpse of his commitment to duty, Lester, because he will leave the warmth of Balmoral, which he loves, and his family, where they are mourning together tonight, as soon as tomorrow, to travel to London and deliver a speech to the nation. Already you're getting a glimpse there of that commitment to duty that we saw from his late great mother right until the end.
Really important points there. Let me go to NBC News Chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker. Kristen, we know there's a statement now from the president, but other former presidents and other leaders now are weighing in on this news.
That's absolutely right. And first, just to set the scene here, Lester, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has ordered the flags at the U.S. Capitol be lowered to half staff. We did get our first public reaction from President Biden, who said that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth was more than a monarch. She defined an era. He goes on to say, in a world of constant change, she was a steadying presence and a source of comfort and pride for generations of Britons, including many who have never known their country without her. The president calling her an enduring admiration for Queen Elizabeth united people across the Commonwealth. The 7 decades of her history-making reign bore witness to an age of unprecedented human advancement and the forward march of human dignity. And as you say, Lester, we are hearing from former presidents as well who met her. Former President Donald Trump saying, Melania and I are deeply saddened to learn of the loss of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. He met with her in 2018 and 2019. The former president going on to say she will always be remembered for her faithfulness to her country and her unwavering devotion to her fellow countrymen and women. Former President Obama and Mrs. Obama also releasing a statement. They were just here at the White House yesterday for the unveiling of their portraits. The former president saying, Michelle and I were lucky enough to come to know Her Majesty, and she meant a great deal to us. Back when we were just beginning to navigate life as President and First Lady, she welcomed us to the world stage and with open arms, with extraordinary generosity. Time and time again, we were struck by her warmth, the way she put people at ease, and how she brought her considerable humor and charm to moments of great pomp and circumstance. The Obamas meeting with her as well several times. And then former President George W. Bush writing, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II was loved and admired by President and Mrs. Bush. She set the standard for steady and dedicated service, performing her duty without fail throughout a historic period for the UK and the world. President Clinton saying we will always be grateful for the kindness she showed us through the years, particularly during our visits to Buckingham Palace in 1995 and 2000, and for all she did to deepen this special relationship. And then the statement from the Carters as well, saying that her dignity, graciousness, and sense of duty have been an inspiration, and we join the millions around the world in mourning a remarkable leader. And I think that really underscores the point, Lester, that people are mourning all across the country here and really all around the world. And these extraordinary visits that she had with the present president and former presidents, 14 in all, if you count a meeting that she had with former President Hoover at the time, just really underscored the special relationship between the U.S., between the UK. There were so many notable moments, Lester, that evolved throughout the years, throughout those visits. One being when she rode horses with former President Reagan. She loved horses, and so that produced this extraordinary, iconic image of the two of them. And then just an anecdote that I will share during her last visit to the United States. She was being hosted here at the White House for an official dinner by the Bushes back in 2007, a white tie event, Lester. The fact that it was white tie was rare. And former President Bush was delivering a speech. He started talking about an historic event, and he started to confuse the date of that event. And the Queen apparently gave him a look, the former president saying it's a look that only a mother could give. And she really had these incredibly personal moments with these U.S. presidents, really strengthening the bond between the two nations. Lester.
Yeah, I recall that story. Kristen, thank you for sharing. Let me bring in NBC News historian Michael Beschloss. Michael, our country famously defied a monarch, and yet this monarch for 70 years has had a really profound impact here and elsewhere. Why?
Well, one thing I think we've got to really focus on, and we'll learn probably more about Lester in the next few weeks and months and years, is that this was really an amazing woman. This was not just someone who was a great diplomat and knew not to laugh at the wrong time or not to give someone the side eye if they were doing something wrong. You know, think of it this way. She was born in the 1920s. Her father was the brother of the Prince of Wales. She was never expected to become queen. She was not really high up in the line of succession. Suddenly, the king abdicates in 1937. Suddenly, she is going to be the heir to the new king. And the result is that she then becomes queen in her 20s in 1952, a time when most people are pretty unformed. And look what a different world it was. You know, we were talking, Kristen was mentioning the fact that she met with President Kennedy in 1961. Well, when Kennedy went to Buckingham Palace, the British government said, "Is there anyone you'd like to have at the banquet with the Queen?" And Kennedy's aides said, "Yes, we'd like Jackie Kennedy's sister Lee, who lives in the house in London, very close to Buckingham Palace." And the palace replied, "We can't have Jackie's sister because she's divorced. The Queen does not entertain divorced people at dinner at Buckingham Palace." That was only 1961. Look at how different that was from the world of 2022. Yet, Queen Elizabeth II managed to remain central and relevant.
Oh, Michael, I'm sorry, you still with us?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I did want to ask you about King Charles III, and whether you think he will want to reach out to the administration here or other foreign governments quickly.
I am sure he will reach out to the American government quickly, something that Winston Churchill always said. I'm sure you know this one, Lester. He always advised other prime ministers of Great Britain, never get too far away from the Americans. Make sure that that relationship is always close, even if you disagree.
And the White House has not said one way or the other whether the president would be traveling for the funeral. Historically speaking, would it be likely that he would?
I would be surprised if he did not. Given the length of this relationship, the importance of our relationship with the UK, and it's rare that something like that doesn't happen, and sometimes has ramifications. For instance, when Franklin Roosevelt died in April of 1945, long before you and me, Roosevelt was fated in Washington. There was a funeral at the White House. He was buried at Hyde Park, New York. And Winston Churchill, his great friend and ally of World War II, did not come, largely because the British thought that it was still too dangerous for the prime minister to sail across the Atlantic before there was peace with Nazi Germany. And oddly enough, for years, there were people in both England and the United States that felt that that cast a little bit of a pall over relationships. So diplomacy does have some importance.
All right, Michael, thank you. Let me bring in again NBC News British historian Andrew Roberts. Andrew, thank you for sticking with us here. Can you shed a little light on the relationship between the Queen and the United States, how she felt about this country?
Yes, she loved America. As I think I mentioned, she only had 3 holidays in her life where she was not queen, as in she was not visiting as a head of state. And in all 3 of them, she went to visit Kentucky. And her, in a sense, personal belief in the special relationship was something that was inculcated with her during the Second World War, especially the way in which she got on with people like Dwight Eisenhower. And she also made a special effort with all the American ambassadors to the Court of St. James. So yes, she was somebody who loved America. And I think that.
Yeah, I was going to say the monarchy, of course, is steeped in tradition. Did she enjoy those traditions? And I think back to only a few days ago, officially appointing a new prime minister. Did those sort of things, were they important to her that they follow a strict tradition?
Absolutely. Well, that is her job, to appoint prime ministers. It's an absolutely central, key constitutional point, is that it's her who appoints the prime minister, and that keeps the politicians under control extremely well. They can sometimes become hubristic and somewhat sort of power hungry, and it's a good thing for them to be reminded that there's somebody above them in the pecking order. It's worked extremely well for us over the years.
Yeah, and doesn't the Queen and now the King offer advice in terms of state policy?
That's right. Well, we don't know exactly what is said in the meetings because the Queen has never said, and the Prime Ministers certainly never say. She is constitutionally expected to, the phrases, advise, encourage and warn. And we believe that she has done all of those three things to her Prime Ministers at different stages. But the fact is we just can't be certain.
All right, Andrew, thank you for that. We want to show you a picture just from a moment ago. The flag, the American flag at the White House is now at half-staff, and to honor Queen Elizabeth, who died today at 96. Let me bring in Wendy Nagel. She's the editor-in-chief for People magazine. Wendy, we've been looking through this through the eyes of America, her relationship with America, and the importance of a figure like the Queen to many Americans. Can you enlighten us on that, why this connection is so strong?
I think the connection is so strong. Obviously, this is a key ally for us, but also there are so few female leaders that we've seen over this tenure of time, and she has been our strength and stay. She's told us how to keep calm and carry on. You know, she has seen so much of history and been a part of history and been a real leader that people can aspire to in terms of everything that she has weathered with such a calm demeanor and her incredible sense of duty. You know, the Queen is someone that it was never an option to quietly quit. She worked right up until the very end, and her sense of duty was unparalleled. And I think that is such a touchstone for everyone across the globe.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes if some of the struggles, some of the personal family struggles they had, that people, could in some ways identify if that made her somehow more accessible or someone more to admire.
Yes, I think that's exactly true. We could all relate to the tensions and issues that bubbled up in the family, and we could see how that played out in our own families, and it made her incredibly relatable. And also in her later years, we really saw her as a grandmother and a great-grandmother. You know, as she was steering the monarchy into a more modern age, we also saw that play out in her relationships with her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren.
All right. Let me go back to Daisy McAndrew, a royal expert for NBC News. Daisy, as we enter this period of mourning right now, our friend Keir Simmons acknowledged that a lot of folks don't know how to react. They saw this coming. They knew it was likely going to happen soon, but are surprised by their reactions. Do you think we're going to see a lot of that, a sense of surprise of people feeling the way they feel?
I really do think that. And as you quite rightly said, logically thinking about this, of course, we all knew it was a case of when, not if, and that when was probably going to be sooner rather than later. But I think in a weird way, this still will rock the country, because when you're used to something always being there, and in this case, that something being the Queen, and she's not there the next day, I think there really will be shock and reverberations. And it might take a while, but I suspect that when her body is brought back to London and is laid in state in Westminster Hall in the Houses of Parliament, I think the numbers of people that will come to show their respects will be huge. And that might come as some surprise. I think people will be reflecting that she was always a symbol for us, but what she symbolized over the last 70 years has changed hugely. Of course, when she first became the Queen, the monarch, the monarch was held, as almost as being sent from God. There was a religious element to it, and people would bow and scrape towards the monarch, but thinking that this was almost a holy symbol. Of course, that symbolism has changed a lot, and nowadays people think of her as a symbol of stability and service and hard work, as a reflection, as many politicians and so on have been saying today, of the best of us, as the Prime Minister said, the rock on which the nation was built. So that stability is going to be shaken now, and people are going to be thinking about the future. What is the future of the country? Where is our place in the world? What's going to happen to the Commonwealth? Something that the Queen was so passionate about, keeping the Commonwealth together. What will Prince Charles, now King Charles, be like? Will he be a leader? Will he be strong as she was? And also, it's been very notable over the last few months that King Charles, as he is now, has shown quite a lot of emotion. How much emotion will we see in the next few days? He will now be facing his official accession in a ceremony tomorrow. Tomorrow at midday, I think church bells around the country, muffled bells, will be ringing out. There will be lots of moments of reflection over the last few days. And of course, none of us, unless we're in our mid-90s, as the Queen was, can remember the last state funeral of a monarch and the last passing from one generation to the next. So it is going to be a strange period of reflection and a bit of navel-gazing about who we are.
Yeah, and you mentioned King Charles III. As we watch this process, we watch him speak tomorrow, take the reins of the monarchy, we have to remember that he's not just a member of the royal family. He is also the son of the late Queen, and so he will be viewed, I guess, through a lens of a grieving son as well.
Exactly that. And if you think of his predecessors, it was not the done thing for them to show emotion at this time, because this time was, a moment of great constitutional significance. I mean, going back hundreds of years, it was a time when one monarch passed on to the next, where you might be expected to have some sort of turmoil from foreign invaders. So it was always a time when the new monarch would have to show that he or she was strong enough to defend the nation. Of course, the monarch now has a different role, and it's more about reflecting modern Britain. It's about showing that they can understand us and ask us to understand them. So he will have that slight difficulty of trying to work out how much emotion to show us, how much to let us into his personal grief, or whether his role is actually to be strong on behalf of us. And of course, he might come to some sort of criticism of he's being too stoic, he's being too stiff upper lip. We want to see some warmth and some emotion. So all of those things will have to be very carefully thought through.
All right, Daisy, thank you. We continue to watch the pictures here of people who've made their way to Buckingham Palace, who are slowly making their way by in a procession, people leaving flowers here. I don't know if this is Buckingham we're looking at. It's Windsor Castle. People leaving remembrances in honor of their late Queen. Let me bring in NBC's Molly Hunter. Molly, we know that world leaders are weighing in right now, and we're hearing from the Vatican, I understand.
We are. We just got a statement from Pope Francis. It's actually addressed to His Majesty the King, Charles III. He writes, "Deeply saddened to learn of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I offer heartfelt condolences to Your Majesty, the members of the royal family, the people of the United Kingdom, and the Commonwealth." It's a long statement. He continues to say, "I willingly join all who mourn her loss in praying for the late Queen's eternal rest and in paying